We're in the middle of San Francisco with Eleana Sue of
Yeah.
Shared Cultures.
Hi.
I'm Jenise,
I'm Cope.
and this is Anatomy of a Hustler. So Eleana, tell us what brought us here today.
So me and my partner Kevin, we have a small business called Shared Cultures here in San Francisco, and we ferment seasonal misos and shoyus using materials that we get from our local farmers markets. So, yeah.
You say it so casually, like fermented misos and
Shoyus,
and
yeah.
shoyus.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more of like what that looks like and what the end product is?
Yeah, so miso essentially is fermented beans and rice, which is with addition of salt. It's actually, so koji is actually the main ingredient in shoyus, misos, and tamaris. And koji is actually a fungus that we grow on rice right now. And it's traditionally grown on rice or soybeans, but we grow it on rice. And the fungus, like fungi in general, do not have mouths, or they don't have like visible mouths. So they secrete enzymes, and the way that they use, the way that they feed themselves is through the secretion of these enzymes. They break down starches and proteins. And the starches get broken down into sugar, and the proteins get broken down into amino acids. And sugar and amino acids are, amino acids are umami, are the things that we as humans love to eat. So, by growing koji on rice, for example, rice has a lot of starch that ferments into sugar, and that's kind of the catalyst of how, the fermentation process starts. And then it starts feeding on the beans or the proteins in the beans in the fermentation process. So for us, we actually, we ferment not just using soybeans. We also, we grow the koji exclusively on rice. We actually source Coda Farms rice, 3rd generation Japanese American farmer. And, we don't just use soybeans. We use chickpeas, navy beans, black beans. We're actually working on a project now with Slow Foods, and we're going to be fermenting Rancho Gordo beans. So, really, if you really think about it, it doesn't matter where the protein is coming from. It just has to have some protein. It doesn't matter where the starch is coming from. It just needs some starch. So we have like misos, for example, that we use corn. Corn is high in starch. We do misos. Like a really popular one is a honey nut squash one that we do. Honey nut squash does have a little bit of protein, but it also has a lot of starch. So those flavors kind of ferment into these amazing sugars and amino acids, and it just totally transforms like what you would think of corn or what a honey nut squash would taste like. It's very familiar, but it's very different at the same time. So that's kind of what we do. And so it's, and there's not many people doing it. And
I was gonna say it's when people think of miso, it's like miso soup. You go to a Japanese restaurant, but you're starting to implement, like you said, honey nut squash.
Yeah.
I was stalking your website, cocoa nibs, peppers, just different things.
Yeah.
How do you come up with all of these ideas?
We sound so like, we go to the farmers markets a lot. I actually haven't been the last 2 months just because we've been so busy with December fulfillment. Actually, so we went to Japan in October. We were actually able to take a whole month off and go and tour facilities where they've been making miso and shoyu and fermenting for 12 generations. So we actually stopped fermenting in October, and then as soon as we got back, November and December, we were fulfilling, and we were pooling all the miso that we had made prior to our trip. And then, January has kind of been 2 weeks of rest, and then also some planning and playing catch up now, and getting ready for February. So February, we're actually slated to ferment about 1,200 pounds of miso.
Wow.
But all the misos that we make, and it's not the traditional stuff. We get inspired by going to the farmers markets and by seeing what's available in season. So we actually don't know exactly what we're going to be fermenting in February. We have the first ferment scheduled for the Rancho Gordo Slow Foods collaboration. That's going to be an 8-month ferment available in August and September-ish. That's our plan. And so beyond that, I need to go to the farmers markets, and I like to talk to the farmers and ask, what do you guys have in excess of? What are you excited about? How can I help? If somebody has an excess of sunchokes, for example, that's something that I get really excited about. Like, let's ferment that and turn that into something beautiful. So, everything that we do, for the most part, it's things that, we get excited about at the farmer's market. But beyond that, it's also kind of just repeats of things that we've done the prior year. Like
Yeah.
we made a mirepoix miso using carrots, onions, and celery. And that's so delicious because carrots, onions, and celery all have some sort of starch. And we caramelize those flavors and then they get fermented and it totally transforms. And so things like that, and like our morel miso, which we've been doing for like 2 to 3 years now since we started. That was one of the first mushroom misos we were excited about, and we continue to do it. Those get thrown into the plan, of like what we're going to be making. But then we try to add like a few additions of like new things to like not only get people excited about what we're making, but we're also excited personally of like, what does a sunchoke miso taste like? What does a roasted potato miso taste like? These are things that like questions that we have in our own heads that we are curious about. And so, by making it and then sharing it with our customers and our, it's a really exciting journey that we all like go on together.
Sounds very collaborative.
Yeah, it's been really, really wonderful. I think, being able to work with restaurants and being able to work with farmers and hearing ideas on what inspires them and then thinking about flavors. Like one of the restaurants we work with is like Flour and Water, and they do like a lot of Italian food. And one thing that I've been really excited about, not necessarily making this miso for them, but thinking about what our restaurant customers and what our customers in general do with our misos. They make a lot of pastas with it. So when I think about pastas, I think about like Calabrian chilies and like these gorgeous white, Italian beans. So that might be a miso that we're definitely going to be making this year in preparation for summer. So, it's like the inspiration comes from all over and there's no shortage of ideas. Just more of a shortage of time and resources to make all those ideas happen. Because it's a lot of physical labor making everything, especially because we are just simply cooking the beans in a giant stock pot like you would do at home. Like you would be cooking it in a regular pot, but we're just cooking it in like 5 pots, 6 pots. And so there's nothing different in our setup than from a traditional regular like kitchen setup, other than we're just doing like an intense amount. And we'd love to, and hopefully in the future, have the tools to be able to have pressure cookers and things like that to help us like make more a little bit easier. But because we are in a shared commercial kitchen space in the city and it's, space is a resource, there's no way we could even buy a commercial anything, to make that work. So not yet. But for now it's, it's working. It's just, you just have to kind of suck it up a little bit, and we wear these back braces, like we have back braces. And so we wear a lot of protective, like things that, that kind of help when you're like trucking beans and rice, because they're big 50-pound bags that we're just literally carrying on our shoulders, from our shelves to the kitchen to prepare. So
it sounds very laborious.
Yeah,
it
is.
You had mentioned earlier how you said 8 months for fermentation. Is that standard for everything you ferment, or just like how long is the process?
Yeah, so some of our ferments are 8 to 9 months. Currently we have like a morel miso and the black bean miso, and then we're going to be working on the Rancho Gordo miso. Those are all like 8 to 9 month ferments. We actually also have one that we're releasing for Lunar New Year this weekend. That's a 19-month ferment.
Oh, wow.
So and those are the longer ones, and we love to do more longer ones because the flavor is more deep and more umami. So the longer you ferment things for, basically proteins take longer to ferment. Proteins take a longer time to denature and break down into amino acids to give you that umami flavor. A lot of actually miso companies ferment proteins, but they put them in a chamber or in a heated room to accelerate the fermentation time. And we don't do that, because what ends up happening is, although the umami is there, the salt has not had a time to kind of slowly work its way through. And so what ends up happening is the flavor is umami, but also very salty. So that's why when you taste a lot of miso, sometimes at the grocery store, or even shoyus, for example, you taste this umami, but you also taste an equal amount of salt that's like hitting you on that first palate. And so for us, we don't do any of that, and we just allow time to ferment very slowly. And so what ends up happening is we always want the umami to be driving the seat. I always say the umami has to drive the seat and drive the car, and salt has to be hanging out in the back seat. It always has to be the last note, like a very faint note at the end. And that's how we know our long-term misos are ready. But because we ferment in a very small space, we actually have a small storage closet in the back of our facility that we use to ferment things in. We do a lot of short-term ferments as well. So short-term ferments are things like, traditionally they're known as white misos. They're things that, you go to the grocery store, you see the white and the red and the darker ones. So the white misos are actually mostly koji rice, it's mostly starch. So it's mostly 60% starch, so that starch turns into sugar. And so those sweeter misos are able to ferment for a shorter period of time. So those are done within 2 to 3 months. So a lot of our misos are actually done in that matter, where we're having a high percentage of starch, like corn miso or honey nut squash miso, and those are ready faster, and then we're able to also ferment more seasonally. Whereas the longer term ones we have to plan like far out.
Especially since space is a luxury.
Yeah, space is a luxury. And, a lot of our customers in the beginning, had this kind of thought in their head that they thought that the longer term ones are better. And I totally understand that, because in wine or in cheese and things like that, you always think the longer things are aged, the better it is. But it's not necessarily true in the case of miso, because if you think about it, the koji rice, the fungus that we're growing on the rice, that's our like catalyst. That's the thing that ferments everything. And we actually spend about 2 whole days growing the koji itself, and 1 day of preparation. So it's a 3-day process to grow the fungus, and that's the most valuable thing. So for us, if we're doing a short-term miso and we're adding more of this fungus into our ferment, we actually get less product. Right. So for just kind of clarify, if a short-term miso, you're using 60% koji rice versus a long-term, you're doing like 50%, and you're doing 50% bean, you're actually going to get more product because you're adding more beans or more protein as the filler to ferment for a longer period of time. Versus if I'm doing a short-term ferment, I have to add more of my starter. And I have less beans in it. So I have less product. And they're also 2 different products, because this one's a sweeter miso, less salty, 5%, versus something that's fermented for a longer period of time. It's going to be a little bit more salty, but more umami, but not sweet. So like different applications.
Yeah,
so
lots of education for not just for like your customers and for like your end user. Right. You have a lot of passion when you speak. Where did this passion for ferments and koji come from?
Honestly, like it just was like self-discovered. I used to be a paralegal. I've always been like doing desk jobs. I was a paralegal for a very long time, and then I worked in corporate real estate for a very long time. And I was actually really depressed when I was at my corporate real estate job. That was before I transitioned to this. And I think it was just simply because I was hustling super hard at work, but I couldn't seem to like climb the ladder as like I saw my male counterparts were, and we had a lot of honest conversations at work about pay, and it always seemed like I was getting paid less than my male counterparts, even though they had less experience than I was. And, it's hard to not take that personally. Yeah. And, I just felt like during my time at my last company, I was just constantly trying my best, and it was just things were not happening the way I envisioned things to happen. Right. And so I got really depressed, and I used to live in Palo Alto, and I would run before and after work just to kind of clear my brain in the woods. And with rent being so high, I couldn't really afford to do many activities anyway. So being in the woods was the only thing that was like not only free, but also good for my mental health. And on one of those runs, I like to say the mushrooms found me. There was a patch of yellow chanterelles. Didn't know what they were. I just thought they were so beautiful. They were yellow. They were bright. They were like so bright, and it was like cheered me up. I was like, wow, I found this like little nugget in the woods. I don't know what it is. It's so beautiful. I'm gonna like go home, put it in the fridge, I'll deal with it later. And that day I went to the library after work. I like looked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, after 3 hours of like, am I gonna poison myself? Like yellow is usually not like a good color in the woods.
Right.
I determined that it was a chanterelle from reading all these books that I had checked out. And from that moment on, it was just like a light kind of switched on in my head. And it was so much easier to get motivated in the morning to wake up before work, to go for these runs, and so much easier to get motivated after work. Because at that point, you know, before finding that mushroom, it was literally me forcing myself to go out for runs before and after work, just to like get serotonin in my head and exercise. And then afterwards, it didn't become like, oh, you got to do this for mental health. It was like, oh, I'm like motivated to find these things in the woods. I wasn't even thinking about my depression anymore.
Right.
And kind of from there, it trickled down to like you start noticing a lot more things in the woods, not just mushrooms, but you start thinking, are these nuts, are these acorns edible? What about these plants? And, you know, I started checking out books in the library. And I started gathering a bunch of stuff and dehydrating them. And it's like, what do you do with all this stuff? Besides like the obvious things of like, you know, maybe dried mushroom salts or, you know, dehydrating them, turning into powder, like bay leaves, for example, you turn them into powder and you just keep it in your pantry. But I wanted to see what I could do beyond just the drying.
Yeah.
And so from that moment on, I started reading a lot of preservation books. And the library has always been kind of that main resource for me, because you can find amazing books there and not have to, you know, money for me at that time was really tight because I was paying so much money to live in Palo Alto.
Right.
So I was leveraging those resources. And from that moment on, you know, I stumbled upon the book, The Art of Fermentation by Sandor Katz, and he talked about koji in there. And koji, as I was reading, I got really excited because it said, oh, it's a fungus and it's part of the mushroom family and it's used to ferment things. And I was like, wait, but I'm finding all these mushrooms in the woods and I love mushrooms so much because they're saving my life. And now you're telling me there's a fungus that I can use to ferment things that I have found. Like,
wow.
You know, and there wasn't much in his book other than talking about what it does. And so it kind of went on Google, looked it up, and I actually found this guy, Rich. He had this book this blog called Our Cook Quest, and he had all these wonderful, weird experiments he was doing with koji, besides just the traditional misos and soy sauces. And I was hooked. And I remember finding him on Instagram and DMing him and falling into this wonderful rabbit hole. And then actually he wrote a book. So like a year later he came out, or a year and a half later he came out with a book. But it was just kind of like this perfect timing where I was just, the universe led me to this hobby without me, like, I wasn't searching for it. It found me, and all I did was simply like kind of follow that like curiosity and that passion.
Love it.
And I almost had to, because it was the only thing that was like pulling me out of depression.
Right.
You know, and shortly after I actually met my partner Kevin. And luckily at that time I was in a better place in my life to actually be able to like be in a relationship. Because before, you know, when you're depressed, it's like all cards off the table. You're just trying to take care of yourself. And the mushrooms and this fermentation journey kind of started like, you know, just kind of taking over and brought me so much joy. And then I met Kevin, and slowly I started pulling him into this world because
I was going to ask, was he equally excited about mushrooms?
Yeah, actually our first date, I remember like showing him all the photos of these mushrooms that I have found. And I had done that same move to I don't want to say many guys, a few guys that I've been on dates with, and every single one of them gave me the weirdest, like, you are weird.
Mushroom.
Like you're weird. Like it just, as soon as it like started, like, oh, what are you passionate about? And you know, it would be like, oh, I'm really into mushrooms. Like,
they're cool.
They're like, yeah.
Psychedelics.
Yeah, totally. Like drugs, like no, like, you know, just regular mushrooms you would find in the woods, like. And, you know, it's always been like, oh, is that something you're interested in? Or do you want to go on a hike with me? Because, you know, those are the things.
Let them enter your world, right?
Totally. And I would say many of the people that I met just didn't share that same enthusiasm. But Kevin was immediately like, whoa, I've never seen that before. Or like, well, look at the colors on that one. Like, where'd you find that? And I've never, and he even said, like, I remember him saying, like, I've never noticed these things before when I'm in the woods. And so he really appreciated how, you know, like this newfound knowledge of being able to see things, you know, in the woods, like, and really pay attention, because, you know, before that, I think, or in general, a lot of people are going to the woods to just finish the hike or the trail, and you're just going through the forest running, or like, all right, I'm gonna get to the parking lot, I'm gonna go on this hike, I'm gonna finish the hike, and like I'm gonna go on to the next thing. But you're not like hyper focusing on what's in the woods. And mushroom,
you're moving through it, but you're not sitting with it or being present.
Totally. And that's something that mushrooms for me have taught. You know, not only has it like taught me, like, you know, it helped me out of my depression, but it's really taught me to be more mindful of like what's present in all situations, not just in the woods, but it's like, you know, just being like, what's mindful? Like, what are things, like, there are things that you normally don't notice that are actually there, but because in our heads on the day-to-day, it's just so chaotic and hectic, we don't take the time to like slow down, right? So mushroom hunting personally has been that thing where I've been able to like take that lesson in and apply it to all things in life. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
So first date to first business, how did that translate?
Oh, and then what year was this? Like, give me a little bit of an anchor in time.
I think, you know, I wrote it down a while ago because I was thinking about it. But so I guess Kevin and I have been together for 5 years now. And so it was probably, so before we met, it was probably 2 years before, so it was probably 7 years ago that I found mushroom hunting, because because like first year I was like super depressed, and then I like started getting into this hobby, and then I met Kevin, and then we started kind of dating. So yeah, I think it's been 7 years now since I found my first mushroom, you know, and you know, I've been super lucky, I think, because I found it at a time where it wasn't like the popular or the it thing to do, you know. Like I just really feel like they were calling to me, and then I feel lucky that now I'm in a position, as it's getting more popular, to be in a position to share that joy or to educate people on how they can figure out, you know, like which mushrooms are edible and how to pay attention in the forest. Like we just led a 2-day mushroom foray this last weekend up north, and I remember one of the girls that I met, Lisa, she approached me, she was like, I just don't see the mushrooms, like I just don't see them, tell me how you're seeing them. And I was like, well, if you just like look into the like, just like take a moment like to like really digest what you're looking at. And I got so lucky because like as I was saying that, I spotted chanterelles like just like in the corner. I just saw them, you know. But you know, the chanterelles are like yellow and white, and they camouflage with the leaf litter on the ground. But it's like, you know, opportunities like that made me so happy to be able to share that, you know. And I was lucky enough to share that with Kevin, and you know, pretty soon, I mean, like we were kind of just doing it together.
The mushroom hunting, right?
Yeah, the mushroom hunting first. It was definitely the mushroom hunting. So before we started our business, Shared Cultures, it was, I quit my job in January before the pandemic happened.
Wow.
So I was ready to go all in on my business. And it was just going to be me. Kevin at that time, he was in a startup, so he was doing his own thing. And what ended up happening was he was actually doing his startup for a while. And as I was quitting, his startup was slowly crumbling. So what ended up happening was midway, like I would say maybe in like May or June, he decided to go in on Shared Cultures with me, because he was deciding like, oh, what am I going to do now that my startup is no longer it's not working out. So he decided to throw in the towel, and we had discussions because I wanted to go all in on my business. And there was a month where he was applying for jobs, and he was thinking, okay, maybe I can be the one to like make some real money, you know, have like a 9 to 5, a more predictable money, and then I could help you on the side while you get this up and running, because I didn't have any income. And then at that point, the pandemic was like in the full was raging. And so I was trying to figure out like, okay, how can I make money? Because my initial thought after quitting my job was I'm going to sell to restaurants first.
I was going to ask, did you have a seedling of the business, or this was just hey, I love these things so much, I'm going to turn it into a business?
Yeah,
I was
that
able
was,
to say, were you
yeah.
selling mushroom hunting?
No.
Or were you selling at the time?
I wasn't selling anything. That was it. It was like I had a seedling of a business. The one crux, or the one thing that I like based everything off of was there's one product that restaurants love. It's called shio koji, and it's a lacto fermented koji. So you grow the koji, the fungus, on rice, and after 3 days you pull it, and then you basically immerse it with salt and water, and you ferment it for 7 to 10 days. So it's a relatively short ferment, and a lot of restaurants use it. It's actually a secret ingredient in a lot of not only Michelin-star restaurants, but like fried chicken places, and it helps tenderize the meat of the protein that you're using and provides an umami flavor. So it's a wonderful product, and I knew of a lot of restaurants that were using it. So my plan was I was going to like quit my job. I was going to start with just selling this product to restaurants while I took the time to figure out the business.
Right.
But then all the restaurants shut down because we were in pandemic mode. And and so it was, and I was just thinking, oh no, what am I going to do? And I just remember, like, Kevin and I had all this time at home, and he was thinking like, oh, I'm going to go find another job. But slowly what ended up happening was I just need a little bit more help. Like I was doing a lot of projects, and I would ask him for help, and he would help. And then we started getting orders in through Instagram. So it was very casual at first. It was literally, oh, I'm a friend of your friend, whatever, X, Y, and Z. They're always friends of friends. Yeah. First it was friends, then it was friends of friends, and those friends of friends of friends, and people were just sending us DMs like, I really want to try that. I really want to order that. How can I get my hands on it? And it's like the initial wave of people, we were uncomfortable taking money. So we were like, oh, let's do trades, like I'm down to trade you for that pie that you made. Because we were all pandemic, right? So everybody was like making a lot of food. So we were just doing trades for a while. And then after a while, if it was a friend of a friend, then like, because they were like, oh, it tastes really good. I got some from my friend. And I did the trade with my friend, but then I was like, okay, maybe we can start taking money from the friends of friends, know? Right. And so then we started getting orders in, and then we needed a little bit more help. And I was looking at Kevin, and at that time I was working at Far West Fungi. And I had been working at Far West Fungi for a long time, because before I quit my job, the reason why I was comfortable enough to quit my job, my Monday through Friday job, was that I was working at the farmers market Saturday and Sunday for Far West. So I figured if I quit my job at my corporate real estate job, job, I could do I can continue to do Saturday and Sunday shifts at the farmers market, and I could pick up a Friday. So that way I'm working 3 days, I'm still getting money. It's not as much as you get paid at your desk job, but it's enough to kind of keep you by. And so as we started to get more busy, I asked Kevin like, hey, Far West is hiring. I know it's not I know it's not what like what you think it is. Like it's not going to pay you that much, but the thing about these jobs is that it's not that stressful. Right. It's not like you're getting paid a lot of money, so there's a lot of demand like on like your time and your energy. It's like you go in, you go out, you go in, you go out. It's like relaxed, friendly, fun atmosphere. Right. So Kevin actually started working for Far West. And so we were both working at Far West, and then we both decided, all right, like let's do this full time. Let's do this full time, but let's keep our job at Far West.
I'm a big fan of tapering into your hustle like
totally. That. Yeah, and it was really wonderful because Far West till this day, they are such great partners and friends of ours. Like we source a lot of our wild mushrooms from them. Amazing. We currently don't have a place to unload pallets, of jars. We use their warehouse for that. So it's just been a wonderful friendship, and we're so grateful to them. And also for their support as as like they knew we were trying to grow this business into like a full-time thing.
Yeah.
So they were really willing to work with us as we started cutting our hours down, you know.
That's so cool.
So that was amazing.
Very communal, very loving, very empathetic.
Totally.
I love everything about that.
Totally. So Kevin went full-time this year in February, you know, and you know that was last year, in 2022. So that was a big deal because he started working at Far West basically like right when the pandemic was just like in the full swing, and he didn't stop until, you know, 2022 of February, and then I stopped in October because, you know, we're getting ready to go to Japan for a month, and I haven't been at the market since, you know, because I was working Saturdays at the Ferry Plaza. I had at one point been doing 3 markets, and then I started to do 2, and then I went to 1, you know, so it's always just been like this very organic transition. And now that we're like full time, it's wonderful, but at the same time, it's like, oh my gosh, like we're almost working 7 days a week now because I don't have like a Saturday where I'm like committed to going to my other job. It's like that Saturday then gets filled up with things that we need to do for ourselves. So
full time officially has been like only a couple months.
Yeah.
So October, November, December, January.
Yeah.
Like 4 months officially full time.
Yeah.
So when I said earlier when you were talking about you're on the cusp, you literally just jumped off one part of the cusp where it's like completely full time. Amazing. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And, you know, I think that we feel really grateful to have this opportunity to do what we love every single day. It is a lot of work, though. I remember thinking, like, my desk job was a lot of work, but then I never realized, like, oh, and then I get off at, like, 5 or 6, and then I have, like, 4 hours to myself, and then I have the weekends where I don't have to think about work.
Right.
And it's just, like, the total opposite now that when you have your own business, it's all you can think about. And it's great that Kevin and I are partners in life and partners in the business, but at the same time it does impact like your personal life. You know, like we like haven't been, you know, we're trying to go on more dates, but I mean, I think November, December there's 0 dates. January I think last weekend was like technically like we went up north and we did our 4-way thing event, and then we took 1 day to like kind of like just connect, you know. But it's just tough to make time for personal, like I don't have a lot of time sometimes to even commit to Kevin like as a partner. It's all about the business. And then like our personal relationships with friends have just been like we know they're there for us whenever we want, but it's been a lot of like saying no, and then at this point people don't even ask us to hang out. And it's sad, but at the same time it's like that's just like I've talked to so many entrepreneurs, and that's just how it is in the early days. Like until you get that work-life balance, like you just gotta
get over that first milestone.
You gotta
that first up. You gotta do what it takes.
Totally. And
when you jumped, so
take
it easy. Give yourself grace right now. You know?
I know. But you know, we're so passionate about it. So
it shows. It's how I feel it.
We
it's
love
amazing.
it. We totally love it. And you know, it's a huge sacrifice, but at the same time, it's like, oh, you know, we talk about like this last year, we were talking about, oh, how can we be better? Like, how can we do better work-life balance? And the problem is we just get so excited about projects, and it doesn't seem like work at that time. It's just this idea that we really want to like, you know, like we have in our heads. And as an entrepreneur, you have the power to change an idea into something, right? Like it's in your hands. Like you don't have to ask your boss or whatever. And we get so excited about it, but then we start to realize in the middle of doing it, like, oh shit, we've really like committed. we maybe shouldn't have overextended ourselves. But then we look back and we're like, holy crap, we did that, and we did that, and we did that, you know. And so I feel like all those moments for us personally have been, you know, it's just been wonderful to be able to be like, wow, we're in the shits right now. But then we look back and we're like, wow, we really did it. Like, look at what we've achieved. And was that worth it? You know? Absolutely.
I mean, through everything you're saying, you're like a cart before the horse person. But then when you were like, I'm having a business, I like mushrooms, and that got you to where you are today.
Totally.
So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I think that's the thing that a lot of entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs, they do. They're like, okay, I got to put the cart behind the horse, and this needs to be set up, and everything needs to be aligned before I make that jump.
Yeah.
And you just did the dang thing.
I just did it.
I think that's some. I honestly believe in the power of just stress testing the system all the time, and sometimes you need to catch shit on fire, including burning out a little bit or pushing what that limit is to really figure out, is that a limit? What did I learn in that process? Did I deviate from my course, or am I more in alignment with it?
Yeah. So, that's just how it's been. And I think also for us, we always try to like verbalize what we're trying to do. Like we tell people what we're doing. Like for example, like when I first started, I was so scared, but I just started telling people like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And then that social pressure of you telling people, and then you don't want to like let that, and I'm starting to do that now with like hopefully like personal training will start soon because I need to get a little stronger for the manual work I do. But like I don't really like to exercise too much other than mushroom hunting.
Right.
But like, but I've been telling a few of my close friends like, hey, I think I'm gonna start personal training soon. And so like just planting those little seeds out there. Yeah. And then you have that pressure to then water it, But those are things that like you want to do.
And then you also have a really strong community is what it sounds like. There's so many good people around you that are like, oh, that reminds me of something that she had told me, and they can probably make a connection or a handout or something.
Yeah, totally.
So I was going to say something really cheesy. It almost came out. I was going to say, where do you grow next? But like, where do you, I thought with myself. So where do you go next from here? Like, you just put you guys are fully full-time.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of your guys' shared kitchen space.
I think our dream for this year is to have our own space, whether that's shared with, it's hard because we ideally want our own space, but it's so expensive to have your own space in the city because on top of paying outrageous rent, you also need to pay for like, getting the mouse, like pest control, you need to have your dishwashing services serviced, and there's all these like fees and bills that you have to pay on top of that. So our plan or a dream of ours is we know a few friends who are also in fermentation in the space, or at least in the city, and we'd like to maybe combine or create a community space where it's all fermentation based, where we can also then show, have our community come in and see what like all the various things that are happening or fermenting in this one space.
Kind of like a play kitchen.
Totally.
Shared space.
Yeah.
The first thing I thought of was like kombucha.
Yeah.
Right.
Kombucha producers, beer producers, anyone who's doing fermentation would be a great partner. But you're already started on that track.
Yeah. So we want to create a community space. I think that fermentation is something that is really starting to be, like people are curious about it, and it really started, I think, with the pandemic.
Yes.
And it's hard because like with the pandemic, some people really lost it all, and some people really gained a lot. And we were lucky to be the ones that gained a lot because people were so curious about fermentation during the pandemic. People were making a lot of sourdough bread, sauerkrauts, and things like that. And people now have this newfound knowledge of this, of these practices, and we would love to be able to create a fermentation destination where we can invite people in and really show people like how these foods and these things are made, because it's such an important piece of knowledge of almost like human evolution in a sense. Because when people think about survival, they always think about like huddling and cooking near the fire. But a big part of that conversation that gets missed is fermentation. People were fermenting unclean water to turn into like slight like alcohol to be able to survive. People were preserving foods like cheese and breads and and all these vinegars, all these things are so important, but people don't realize like how much fermentation plays into that.
Right.
And so for us, in the city like of San Francisco, you think of all the wonderful businesses that are out there, but there's that big, I feel like that fermentation community is here in bits and pieces, but it'd be cool to create like a center, for that. So that's something we're really excited about. We're not really sure if it's going to be something, all these things have to line up, whether those businesses are ready to move at the same time we are, whether we can find an opportunity for us to all move into. But, that's kind of like the big goal is, either we do something like that or we find our own space or, we're looking. And, hopefully within that transition, then we're getting a few mechanical parts to help us, such as like conveyor belts, like we still want to hand make everything, but it would be nice to not have to like cook all the beans on a stovetop. Like I would love a pressure cooker. I would love some conveyor belts to help us move product to and from this kitchen space. And I would also love like a jarring machine or like a bottling machine. Like right now, every single jar of miso and every single bottle we like hand pour with just like a little measuring cup with a spout. You know what I mean? Or we pack it in with a spoon. So it's like all these things like that we do exactly how you would do them, just like 100 times more, and that's stressful to your body. So, our dream for next year is just being able to accommodate those improvements into our lives. So
still be an art, but make it a scalable art.
Totally, because it's just not feasible the way that we are working ourselves and are testing our bodies right now. But it is necessary for this stage that we're in. But every single growth stage, especially in a consumer packaged good product, there is a lot of investment that needs to go into it. Because as soon as you start making money and then you buy like one piece of machinery, like each piece of machinery is like $10,000. So like just to or even like when we move into our space and we need to get a walk-in refrigerator, those are not things that are provided to you upon move-in. Like you need to buy your own stove, you need to buy your own oven, you need to buy your own walk-in, and then we want conveyor belts. I mean, these are like easily like $60,000-$70,000 of improvements, which is crazy, because then it's like all this money that we're pinching to save gets reinvested, and then the next stage of growth is even more so, right? So
you've bootstrapped all the way up until this point.
Yeah.
Would you and Kevin ever consider like outside investment?
We've kind of talked about it a little bit. I think ideally we probably want to do like community investment, because we truly feel that like, I don't know if VCs are the way that we want to go, because there's too much pressure on
our private investors.
It's just too much pressure on making that return to them. And we're not doing this for money. We're doing this for our community and for like the beauty of the practice. And so any investment that we take, our investors would have to like understand that, and we're also not trying to cheapen our product. I know that with a lot of VC-backed companies that eventually scale into Whole Foods, what ends up happening is you have to start sourcing lower quality inputs, right, in order to make that price point work for a big retailer like Whole Foods. And for us, like our morel miso, I can't get cheaper morels even if I wanted to. And you can't, because you have to, and you shouldn't, because the forager needs to get paid what they need to get paid to get those, like I worked at Far West Fungi. People would complain to me all the time, like, why are the morels so expensive? And it's like, well, a forager had to drive 6 hours to go to the secret spot in the woods. And then he had to carry a whole backpack full of morels down the hill, or he has to go up the hill. He's traversing. It's a whole day activity. And then you have to transport these mushrooms back to San Francisco. So like, yes, that's why your mushrooms are priced the way they are, right? But
and people need that. They need to have an understanding that there's a lot of process that goes into this to have a true appreciation for the food that's right in front of them.
Totally.
Totally.
And and so that's the things that we're thinking about as we grow, is that we still want to continue to make these really special products, but we can't, there's no way we can cheapen our inputs. And so unfortunately, with a lot of these VC-backed companies, they're always trying to cut costs so that they can make their money back. And so that's not something we're interested in. And so hopefully as we grow, we will be, we're definitely going to do we're going to take on debt, but we're eventually going to do crowdfunding or
friends and family round.
Or equity, friends and family community equity funding, some sort of alternative way to raise money. And it feels that we can only go to the drinking well once to ask for help. So we have we're just waiting for that perfect moment, because we also don't like to ask for help unless we really need We really need it. So that's something that we're really excited about for this year. It feels like we're really close. We keep talking about it, but like we initially talked about earlier, it's like the more you talk about it, the more real it gets, and that's helpful.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, well, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk about today or share. In terms of like any advice you would give to any, like I feel like you've packed so much advice for anyone who's trying to enter the CPG space. Like, here's what it is at the ground floor. But do you have any advice for anyone who's looking to like traverse into entrepreneurship?
Honestly, I would say that the biggest thing is if you're not passionate about it, or if you're just doing it for money, then I would say that's a tough boat to be in, you know, unless you're like super motivated by money, I guess. I guess that could be something that could help.
Yeah.
But, you know, we work a lot, you know, and there are a lot of jobs that would pay you way more in money if you worked this many hours, like immediately, you know. And for me, like, I just feel like the passion has to be there, in like you have to really like be doing it because you love it, and there's an outside, like almost like a force pushing you to do this, you know, because you just truly believe it and you want to see, you know, this thing that you're working on materialize into this world. And so for us, that's like our biggest driving force, I think, because, you know, to be honest with you, it's not, you know, we work 7 days a week sometimes. You know, of course, there are times we're able to, like, we're lucky enough to take a whole month off and go to Japan, but then we were literally in the shits, like November and December. Like, we were working, you know, we got up at 10 a.m., we went to bed at like 1 a.m., and then rinse and repeat for two whole months, you know. And finally in January, we had 2 weeks of just somewhat chill, you know, and then we're like back in it again. So, you know, in order, you know, and it's hard for you to justify working 7 days a week, long, you know, 100+ hours on something if you're just doing it for money. You know?
There's not some sense of fulfillment at the end of it.
Yeah.
You're just chasing burnout perpetually.
It's just not worth it, right? So for me, it's just like, because I think Kevin and I truly believe in what we're doing and the work that, you know, we're excited about it. We're excited about fungi. We're excited about fermentation. We're also really excited to be able to bring in a lot of foraging elements into everything that we do, and showing people like, hey, you know, wild forage leek. We may not have ramps out here in the East Coast, but during the springtime, we do a wild forage leek miso, where it's the equivalent of what a ramp would be in the East Coast, right? And showing people that here in Cal, like, that's exciting to us. And if I have to pick and clean and do all these things, it's worth it, you know? So, yeah.
Awesome.
That's all we had for today.
Cool.
Like, thank you so much for taking your time out of your extremely crazy schedule to do this.
I'm happy to do it. I feel like any opportunity that I have to be able to talk about something I'm passionate with.
I'm super inspired right now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and that's the thing, right? Like, if it doesn't like feel like work or anything, it just feels like this is so fun, and having a platform, any platform, to be able to like spread your passion.
And speaking of platform, where can people find you? That would be a good thing for us to have.
Totally. So you can look at this one, right?
Oh yeah, so the main platform we use is Instagram. It's just Shared Cultures, and that's a play on a few things. Like, not only are, you know, I'm Asian American, well, Kevin and I are both Asian American, and you know, the practice that we do is rooted in Asian culture. So we're trying to share our personal cultures with people, but also we're making cultured food. So we're trying to like share, you know, cultured food. And the third kind of play is that because what we're fermenting with, usually it's just a base of rice and beans. If you really think about it, that's a shared cultural, like cultural thing around all over. I don't care where you're from, but every culture has some sort of rice and bean kind of dish, right? And so for us, what we're doing is it's like it's jarred and fermented.
Rice and bean dish in a jar.
I
know.
My gosh. Yeah. So Instagram Shared Cultures is where you can find us. I'm the only one behind the account, so I post everything. And then beyond that, you know, you could find, you know, we do newsletters where we share like more in-depth kind of, nuggets to our community.
And you get to purchase your misos online, right?
Yeah, so our website is www.shared-cultures.com. Unfortunately, Shared Cultures is taken, so we had to do the dash, but that's fine. And yeah, so that's where you can find us. And this year I'm like trying to maybe get on YouTube and YouTube Shorts.
It sounds like you're getting on YouTube this year.
I'm trying to, and TikTok, but that's a goal that I have in mind. It's just hard, it's like to do
everything else you're doing, working 7 days a week.
I know, and that's the thing too, because marketing within itself is a job, but it's so important. And
you're telling 2 marketers.
Yeah, it's a whole job, right? And so, but it's important, and it's the way for us to get our message across. So, and something I love to do because I love like talking and like.
And that's how you started Shared Culture.
Yeah,
that's how I found you.
Totally, I love connecting with people that are interested in what we're doing. But it is, sometimes people are like, oh, why didn't you like?
Why didn't you DM me back? You left me
why didn't you DM me back? And I'm like, I have so many other things I have to do. Like, I would love to have conversations with everybody, but we produce everything ourselves. We don't like co-pack anything. Like, I have to work too. Like, I can't,
I still make the product that you love so much.
Totally.
I wish I could just sit here and talk about it all day.
Totally. So, but so yeah, those are the ways you can find us.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you
so much.
Yay,
Appreciate
thank
your
you.
time.
Yeah,
Thank
of
you.
course. Thank you so much.